Good evening. My name is Langamadonko, Deputy President of the Association of Black Securities and Investment Professionals, and I'll be your program facilitator for today. To the President of the Association of Black Securities and Investment Professionals, the Presidents of the Black Business Council, the Governor of the Central Bank of South Africa, past Presidents of ABSIP, and office bearers of the organization, captains of industry, and the family of Mr. Mxolisi Mbetse, I bid you all an auspicious evening. Thank you so much for joining us as we pay tribute to a stalwart, a giant, and a founding member of our prestigious organization who was a champion of transformation in the sector. Reading the tribute that was prepared by the Association of Black Securities and Investment Professionals on his passing, Mr. Mxolisi Mbetse, when the Association of Black Security and Investment Professionals was founded in 1995, his contribution was fundamental to ensuring that it became both a constructive agitator and partner to the state and the financial services sector in order to drive conversation around transformation. In his capacity as ABSIP's second president, Mxolisi worked tirelessly with the original transformation advocate to translate government's intentions to tangible policy proposals. Mutle Mokhase, who worked with Mxolisi Mbetse in the founding of ABSIP, remembers him as a man whose commitment to change was only matched by his unwavering belief that black professionals were more than able and capable of leading the financial sector, and that the South African financial services sector could and would one day be reflective of the country we live in. As ABSIP reflects on its first 25 years, the contribution of Mxolisi Mbetse in creating a lasting legacy of advocating for transformation is a challenge that Pulule Tekakhatebe, the current president of ABSIP, believe must be continued in order to honor the legacy of the generation of Mxolisi Mbetse and also create an enduring legacy for the next generation of black professionals. Farewell, President Mxolisi Mbetse. Lala ngokuthula. ABSIP salutes you. At this point in time, we have leaders of industry, friends, and family who have taken the time to share tributes on the late Mxolisi Mbetse. Right now, we'll cross over to some videos from Ms. Swazi Chabalala and Mr. Owen Maubane as they pay tribute to a friend and a colleague.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this memorial for Mxolisi Mbetse. My name is Swazi Chabalala, and Mxolisi was my friend for over 25 years. I met him in 1995 when I was still in the professional realm, working at Standard Bank. He came to see me to introduce himself when we were selected as part of the US-South Africa Leadership Program, and also to tell me that he would not be traveling with us because we were flying economy and it was a long way, and that he would meet us when we arrived in the US. But I remember thinking at the time, he came to the office, as always, extremely well put together. And I remember thinking, well, I think I've just met a Renaissance man. He was always interested in empowerment in general, but specifically for professionals in financial services. He nurtured the careers of many of us, providing counsel and guidance when we needed that guidance. As you know, he was a founder member of ABSIP, and he led the organization as well during a period. And he shaped the focus of the organization to ensure that we achieved the goals of transforming the sector, and I think the results are evident. He was also the prime mover behind the National Empowerment Fund, and I think he had different ideas of what that fund should look like than what eventually transpired. But there's absolutely no doubt that, the National Empowerment Fund exists because of his efforts. He was an advisor to the late Minister of Public Enterprises, Stella Sitau. In his role, he was advising her on the transformation of public enterprises operationally and through the empowerment of Black professionals that were working at those SOEs. He was at HSBC at the time when they developed the restructuring plan for Transnet, which was eventually, under a different guise, implemented to result in the Transnet that we know today. In 2006, he became my boss when I joined a company he created, IDG, where he was executive chairman. It was an exciting period for us as we worked on projects throughout the continent and advised governments all over the continent, including in Congo, Kinshasa, and Brazzaville, and working in Rwanda and Burundi. It was an excellent introduction for me, which helped me to understand the opportunities that resided in the rest of the continent for Black entrepreneurs. So in some ways, Mxolisi was a pioneer in this regard, seeing the opportunities that the continent represented for Black entrepreneurs. Mxolisi was my friend. He was my counsel. I never made any major professional decisions without consulting him. And he was a counselor to many people. In addition to being passionate about empowerment, he was also an inveterate networker in Africa and globally. He was generous in sharing his skills and knowledge, as well as those networks. He was also, in his guise as Renaissance man, a very passionate follower of Formula One. And I will never forget the year he took Tandana, Martin, and myself to Monaco for the Grand Prix and engendered a love for the sport in which I still retain a very strong interest. A good example of his generosity, and many others will share the times that Mxolisi you created and gave us opportunities for these experiences. His passion for empowerment and transformation, which was really at the core of his values, meant that, like many of us, he was disappointed when ABSIP went into decline with his view that leadership was becoming less selfless in the pursuit of transformation in the sector, and that ABSIP's success, in a way, has led to the false view that there was nothing more to do. Much work, of course, remains to be done, and I think that a fitting tribute for Mxolisi would be to recommit to the transformation agenda in financial services. He would also have wanted us to take stock of the lessons of the last 25 years to understand what still needs to be done to change and transform the sector and the economy, and to use our accumulated skills to leverage technology to broaden access to financial services for our people. I will miss my friend and confidant. He was in some ways misunderstood and perhaps ahead of his time. He refused to march to the same drummer as everyone, which to some engendered suspicion, but he was passionate and deeply sensitive and easily disappointed when he felt that the values driving his passion for transformation were not necessarily shared, and that selfish motives abounded. But his disappointment never led him to disillusionment or to compromise his values to better fit in. This strength of character was the mark of the man, even during his most recent health challenges, which would have felled lesser men. He was a fighter, unique, and ever the Renaissance man, right up until the end. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
My name is Owen Malvane. I am the CEO of Sonata Capital, which is a private equity firm. We've been going for about 10 years and have 2 funds under management. My relationship with Mxolisi goes back quite a ways. It's both personal and also professional. Personally, I've known Mxolisi for over a quarter century. He was one of my best friends. I was very close to him. And I did convey my remarks at his recent funeral, where we said our goodbyes to him just over a week or so ago. He was my best man at my wedding and a really amazing guy. Professionally, we've had quite a long storied relationship, and part of it centered around ABSIP. Specific to ABSIP, just by way of background, I was one of the founders of ABSIP in 1995 when we launched it on the JSE floor under the leadership of Mxolisi, who was the first president. Mxolisi was a senior banker at ABSIP at the time, and it was quite important when we launched ABSIP that the leadership had to have the stature required to get ABSIP to the level we needed from a prominence perspective. I served 2 terms under Mxolisi. We finished in 1997. And then the challenge became who was going to take over the baton from Mxolisi, who had done a superb job as president of ABSIP. And we settled on Mxolisi Mbetse, which was a fantastic choice. Mxolisi was executive director at HBC and then chairman of UBS Corporate Finance. I served 2 terms under him, the first term as SG and then as an honorary EXCO member. It was a phenomenal EXCO we had at the time. There were a lot of initiatives that were initiated, including a scholarship trust that was set up. There was also an investment company that was set up under his leadership. One of the seminal events that launched ABSIP and made it very prominent at the time, and it was actually mentioned by Thabo Siapa at Mxolisi's funeral, was when we decided to celebrate Tito Mbowene's appointment as governor of the central bank. It was quite a seminal event at the time, and Mr. Mboweni was quite happy for ABSIP to be the launch pad for that major announcement. And it so happened that the state president, Thabo Mbeki, also wanted to participate. So you could imagine many captains of industry wanted to be in that forum, and that was all under the leadership of Mxolisi Mbetse. Quite a phenomenal man and quite a phenomenal achievement at the time. I think many people will speak about some of the other things that we did as an EXCO, but for me, his leadership around transformation, empowering Black professionals was always a big part of who he was. And he was driven. If I were to use one word to describe him, he was driven and he was a leader, but he wasn't driven just for himself. He was driven as a leader of others who would lead and leave no one behind. Quite an extraordinary man and quite an extraordinary life. And I'm so gratified for the family that ABSIP has decided to commemorate his leadership and his life. Miranda, Massimo, Marion, to the nephews, Tandana, Martin, and Gino. Your father, your husband, your uncle was a phenomenal man, and he left a lasting imprint on Black professionals in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you to our speakers for those moving tributes to the late Mxolisi Mbetse. And as all can see, he has really made a stellar imprint on our industry and on transformation in general. At this point in time, we'll cross over to Microsoft Teams to connect with the president of the Black Business Council, Mr. Sandile Zungu, who will deliver his tribute. Good evening, Mr. Zungu. How are you?
Good evening. I hope I can be heard. I'm audible and visible.
We can definitely hear you, Mr. Zungu. Thank you so much for making time, Honorable President, to join us this evening.
Thank you very much. I wouldn't have done it any other way for my brother Mxolisi. And thank you to the leadership of ABSIP for deeming it necessary to invite the president of the BBC and me specifically. I'm honored. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point in time, Mr. Zungu, I'll hand over to you to share your sentiments and your memories of the late President Mbetse.
Thank you very much. My recollection of my first meeting with Mxolisi was in 1996. I had just returned from the University of video that you've played of Owen Mabane. He was my colleague at DLJ Bliat. My entering the world of investment banking meant a completely new set of acquaintances and relationships. Mxolisi was the elite of this army of acquaintances. And later on, we became friends. And those who were in the space in 1996 will remember how the global merchant banks were coming thick and fast into South Africa. And arguably, Mxolisi was the most senior Black South African professional amongst all international merchant banks operating in South Africa. He was big. He was a big gorilla. Amongst his role, he was advising the then Minister of Public Enterprises, Stella Stow, when she came up with a blueprint for the restructuring of state-owned enterprises. For example, some of those SOEs were deemed very strategic, and they were given a certain category, with the state having the sole and exclusive ownership preserve, such as AMSCO, for example. Others were deemed to be ideal candidates for a systematic and orderly disposal process. The creation of the National Empowerment Fund to warehouse minority stakes for BEE players was part of the Mxolisi thinking that even Swazi earlier referred to. As an advisory firm, DLJ Bliat was interested in the restructuring and disposal processes. Even though I was an associate in corporate finance, we didn't quite have much direct contacts with Mxolisi. However, my esteemed colleague, Owen Mabane, stayed very, very close, patiently so, and it was to pay back over time. Mxolisi did very, very well for himself. One of the privileges of doing well is that you have a choice to do things you really want to do and leave others to do things you wish are done, but you will have no time for them. When people have money, they will go underground and low key and not to be bothered and only to resurface. Mxolisi was not the kind of person. As you know, he was a founder member of the Association of Black Securities and Investment Professionals, ABSIP, and became its second president between the years 1997 and 2001. He was also very critical in the formation of CBBO, the Confederation of Black Business Organizations, which was a predecessor to the Black Business Council, of which I'm president. At critical times, Mxolisi would have been at the forefront of campaigning for the ANC amongst Black professionals. He was always ready to put his head above the parapet and open to being criticized. But he was marching forward. In 2003, when he was at UBS, we sought his advice when we wished to express an interest in the acquisition of a 5% interest in MTN. Mxolisi, UBS is our advisor. Working with the gentleman, Lucky Sinamulele, were thorough, they were professional, and we got exactly the kind of advice we were looking for from an international advisory firm of UBS's ilk, but most importantly, from the leadership of Mxolisi. Mxolisi was a big deals person. He was not interested in acquisition of 2% interest in a 100 million rands entity. Talk big deals, then you talk Mxolisi. A few years later, he wanted us to buy one of the largest oil refineries in this country. Largest, one of the largest. When I said to Mxolisi, my brother, why don't you start with a network of filling stations? He said to me, my outie, that's shit. Don't you really know who you are? You are thinking of filling stations when we already associate you with the whole refinery. Come on, Zungu. It suffices to say that Mxolisi went on to pitch for the said petroleum refining asset, even though the transaction came to naught. But he was that kind of person who believed more in you than you believed in yourself. That's how great a friend he was. The point is this. Mxolisi knew the historic mission of his generation as distinct from that of the generation of Madiba. In the most memorable words of Frantz Fanon, quote, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it, close quote. I'm not sure what is in relative obscurity. Is it the generation or it is the mission? Whatever. I honestly believe, though, that our generation knows exactly what needs to be done. We know exactly who is our generation. The question is this: are we fulfilling the mission or betraying it? Mxolisi will have died disappointed that we are not fulfilling our generational mission. He will have died disappointed that we are mortgaging our liberation benefits to the best paying scoundrel. They pay us with our own money. Mxolisi will have added, damn it. Mxolisi became a friend. We had our own banter. I will say, when I outie, you are actually Mxolisi Mbetse. Uinyathe Mnyama, the black buffalo. I told him his clan, Mbetse, are found in their numbers somewhere between Newcastle and Glencoe in KwaZulu-Natal. Uinyathe Mnyama. Just like Mzilikazi Khumalo, the son of Mashobane, one of the most powerful lieutenants of Shaka kaSenzangakhona, who took men, women, and cattle in 1823 and went on to establish the Mthwakazi Kingdom in modern Matabeleland in Zimbabwe in 1840 and named its capital KwaBulawayo in honor of his erstwhile mentor and nemesis, Shaka KaSenzangakhona, whose headquarters were also called Bulawayo. uSoshangane Nxumalo kaZikode kaGasa left KwaZulu around the same time that Mzilikazi left KwaZulu. Soshangane was sent by Shaka to conquer the Tsonga people in southern Mozambique. He left with just warriors, young men and cattle. Amongst them were Khoza, Mbetse, Manzini, who are the offshoots of the Zungu people, Mkhatshwa, the Ncumalos, Ndlovu, and many others. Soshangane did what he was sent to do, but he never returned. He instead established the KwaGasa kingdom, named after his grandfather, Gasa, in what is now called Gaza province in Mozambique. His people became known as Amashangane. Men got married and the children took their mother tongue. After the death of Soshangane, 163 years ago, in 1858, his sons, Mawewe and Mzila, fought over succession, one driving the other into the then Transvaal, both east and north. Hence, you'll find the descendants of the people of Soshangane in areas like Shai in Gaza, province in Mozambique, as well as in Limpopo and in Mpumalanga provinces in southern Africa, in South Africa rather. I told these stories to Mxolisi to evoke a sense of greatness and heroism in him, sometimes in banter. But of course, Mxolisi was a great man. He remains my hero and a hero to many, many others. And he will remain so for many decades to come. The Black Business Council, of which I am president, wishes to extend its deepest and most heartfelt condolences to the Mbetse family. The loss of Mxolisi is our loss, and we feel it every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your moving tribute. And we hope that every generation from here onwards will also live to fulfill and to establish a legacy in a similar way that Mr. Mxolisi Mbetse always aspired to. At this point in time, it's my honor and my privilege to welcome the inaugural president of ABSIP, Mr. Mutle Mukhase, to share some words on how he remembers this stalwart of our organization. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon to the Mbetse family, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed an honor to be here before you today to acknowledge and pay tribute to one of South Africa's finest sons, Mxolisi Mbetse. A complex yet simple man, complex in his ideas, a global thinker, years ahead of his time, but simple in his directness. Friend or foe, you always knew where you stood with him. I recall him confronting me around 2000, 2001, saying to me, listen, I see you all over the social pages. You are a banker, not a socialite. So, one of the enduring traits was his self-belief, which meant he sought out the best. Sure, he was for empowerment, as long as he could deliver. For him, excellence in application was a vital part of giving people opportunities. As you all know, he was a co-founder of ABSIP, along with some illustrious names. Swazi, Owen, Greg Boyd, may his soul rest in peace, Reggie Muzariri, Andrew Murray, Lauren Braithwaite. ABSIP was modeled along NASP, which is the National Association of Securities Professionals in the US. And the reason for ABSIP was very simple. For black people to be at the table to be at the table of the most critical sector for the transformation in the economy. It was critical to attract more black people into the sector and to make sure they get given opportunities in the sector. Just to be clear, and I think Sandile picked up on it, investment in corporate banking was relatively small in South Africa in 1994. And the typical route was through working your way through from the branch level. If you had an accounting qualification or an MBA, it would be more direct. So we set about to establish ABSIP. ABSIP was launched on the trading floor of the JSE before there was electronic trading, unimaginable at this stage. Mxolisi was set to play a critical role in getting ABSIP to the table on some of the most critical forums for modernizing the South African financial sector. Because of his relationship with the presidency, the DTI, the National Treasury, Mxolisi got ABSIP to be invited to sit on the Financial Markets Advisory Board. I happened to be the party to sit there on behalf of ABSIP. I then got appointed to sit on the JSE Restructuring Committee, which was responsible for moving the JSE from open outcry flow trading to an electronic trading system. This was fundamental to internationalizing the South African financial markets, increasing the tradability and liquidity of the JSE, ushering a new era for the industry and access to capital. When Mxolisi had your back, he really had your back. His support for me during my presidency of ABSIP meant a lot to me, and I shall forever be grateful. In succeeding me as president, he put his own stamp on the presidency, also ensuring good succession. Much is still to be said about Mxolisi and has been said about Mxolisi today. In searching for a way to capture the essence of the man, I came across the following two quotes. The first by President Mandela and the second by Archbishop Tutu. For those who knew Mxolisi, they might just well be attributed to him. The first one from Nelson Mandela. There is no passion to be found in playing small, in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living. That's President Mandela. And from Archbishop Tutu, I'm not interested in picking up crumbs of compassion from the table of someone who considers himself my master. I want a full menu of rights. To Marion, Miranda, and Massimo, I'm honored and blessed to have known your husband, your father. It is our prayer that God will comfort you and the whole family during this sad time. May He richly bless you as you mourn, and may the light of His presence be a continual source of consolation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for that warm and heartfelt tribute. We are all honored to be basking in the shadow of what you and him have created, the platform that has allowed us to get to where we are as black professionals in South Africa. Thank you very much, sir.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
At this point in time, I'll invite another former president of the Association of Black Securities and Professionals joining us via Microsoft Teams. Please, can we welcome Mr. Kennedy Pungane? Good evening, sir. How are you? Good evening, Mr. Pungane. Maybe this is one of those moments for the modern day proverb, you are on mute, sir. While we wait for him to connect, I think it is important to also mention that in the establishment of the organization, it has helped in terms of driving the transformation and creating platforms for many young professionals. If we look and reflect on where we have come and how far we have come, we are grateful for the contributions of men like Mr. Mxolisi Mbetse. I think Mr. Pungane is now live.
Hello?
Good evening, sir. Good evening, Mr. Pungane. How are you? Oh. Well, it seems we are having a few technical gremlins, but I think... okay, good evening, Mr. Pungane. Okay, I think, are we live now? Good evening, Mr. Pungane, how are you? Okay. I think...
can you hear me?
Sir. Okay, I think we're having a little bit of a technical challenge. Reaching.
Could I get clearance to the MC if I can proceed?
Yes, please proceed, Mr. Pungane.
KGB here?
Yes, sir. Please, please proceed, sir. Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Pungane. How are you, sir?
Okay, I'm going to proceed. Please stop me if I'm interfering. My name is Kennedy KGB Pungane, as known in these circles. Greetings to the Mbetse family, the ABSIP and family friends. It's a great honor to be part of this celebration of a life well lived. I met Mxolisi at ABSIP. Our administration with the likes of Mxolisi Mbetse came immediately after Mxolisi's leadership. I recall the very first interchange I had with Mxolisi at the JSE auditorium, where in delivering his last presidential address and taking questions, I stood up to ask something and referred to him as comrade. What did I know? Fresh in financial markets, years of activism at varsity and prior. I felt I was amongst comrades. I was amongst fellow journalists who were onto something in trying to transform financial services that touched on my own sense of activism. Mxolisi was very quick to reprimand me and asked me to please not refer to him as a comrade, because what we're here to do was to build an unashamedly black but yet consummate professional organization in securities and investments. And I'm going to come back to this sense that Mxolisi had about professionalism and activism. But that was a first encounter with Mxolisi that went on to shape not only my understanding of our historic role as ABSIP in South Africa, but so much more that can limit us in playing our role effectively. And so I want to start where the president of BBC left off in evoking Frantz Fanon when he said, each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it in relative opacity. In that landmark book, The Wretched of the Earth, Frantz Fanon captured something that I think Mxolisi took to heart, because his legacy speaks of a man who was committed to understanding his generation's mission, discovering it, and never to betray it, neither by acts of omission or commission. Frantz Fanon could have been referring to earlier writings, in fact, 2,000 years prior, The Wretched of the Earth book, where a historian wrote, and I quote, "For after King David of Israel had done the will of God in his own generation, he died and was buried with his ancestors, and his body decayed," close quote. This, ladies and gentlemen, is our very own modern David, who, just like Frantz Fanon had chronicled, he had found the mission of his generation, he had fulfilled it, not betrayed it, and at his death, to be with his ancestors. We all sit here today and marvel at his contribution. That a boy born in the darkest hours of apartheid South Africa, condemned and legislated to be in the doldrums of history, he strove for the best education he could find, and he found it beyond the limits of Bantu education in South Africa and made so much of himself. Quintessential self-made man who rose to stride financial markets like a colossal that he was, vanquishing one of the most discriminatory and intimidating careers in global capital markets. Mxolisi did this knowing very well that the day would soon dawn when his generation's mission would need to be fulfilled and not betrayed. Speakers before me spoke at length about how they witnessed him fulfill that mission. Speakers before me spoke about how he strove never to betray that mission. But I just want us to take away 3 things about how he fulfilled that mission, which I believe should inspire his family, inspire colleagues on this call, but even more pointedly, inspire today's ABSIP as it looks at serving its own mission. And these learnings for me are: 1, how he stood up to advise government, the Mandela government, in confronting the significant change that was required in the state-owned enterprises and restructuring government and how it works, and restructuring state-owned companies in what would be modern corporate strategies to ensure that public sector is effective and helps build a new government, a new economy. Colleagues, Mxolisi in galvanizing the resources around him in the institution where he was employed, HSBC at start, to fulfill this role. He left a lesson for us on how we cannot afford as Black professionals to be armchair critics of our own government, that we cannot afford the comfort of spewing words like everybody else around RET, around Tumamina and what doesn't work with it, the ineptitude, the incompetence, the corruption, pervasive in different spheres of government and state-owned enterprises, that we cannot be armchair critics. But like Mxolisi, we need to get our hands dirty, use resources around us, be they our own or the institutions that employ our skills and talents, to confront the need to change and be the change that we want to see in how the private sector and the public sector come together to bring about an economy that will serve our people, to bring about this mission of our generation, which is maybe even more difficult than the Mandela generation that fought for freedom. A generation whose mission is to ensure that South Africa succeeds, that Africa thrives, and rises to take this generation. So that's the first thing, to ABSIPers all over. Just like Mxolisi, we cannot afford to be armchair critics. We cannot afford to stand on the bylines and the sidelines and point fingers. But we've got to jump in the terrain and use the skills that we've got to bring about change. The second takeaway is in this legacy that Mxolisi has left us, which is ABSIP. He's co-founding with luminaries present on this call of the Association of Black Securities and Investment Professionals. It isn't just about Blacks coming together and forming another organization, but it was about galvanizing and organizing like-minded Black professionals around a vision to transform financial services, not just for ourselves, but for our community, for this country. And that ABSIP role within the ambit of BBC and alongside other formations, other trade associations in this country, has got the right, must have the voice, must have the muscle to push for transformation in management of financial institutions, transformation in the ownership of financial institutions, transformation of the services and products that financial services offer our people, and how they come through to our people. The administration that took over from Mxolisi was the proud midwife of the Financial Sector Charter, which moved this country a step further on this journey. But that step is just that, a step in the right direction. So much more still needs to be done, and I implore the current ABSIP leadership to take the baton and move on. And this is, again, maybe an opportunity for me to repeat that point that I made earlier of my first encounter with Mxolisi. That ABSIP needs to stay unashamedly black and yet an association of consummate professionals. ABSIP cannot afford to fall onto the trap of so many of our sister organizations that have been hijacked by populism, that have been hijacked by front page headlines without content. ABSIP cannot falter into an activism without professionalism in this sector. And so I implore our leadership today to remember this learning from Mxolisi. The last one I want to touch on, and Swazi spoke passionately about this earlier on, is the role of IDG, what Mxolisi envisioned with that organization, with that business, and the impact it had. After an incomparable career in corporate, he went on to form his own business. And ladies and gentlemen, there's a case to be made about about the energy, the drive for us to form our own businesses like he did. But not just form them as BE companies with small minority, ineffectual equity here and there, but form them to have strategic influence and to drive change in how we do business in South Africa, to drive change in how we think Africa in terms of our businesses based in South Africa, to drive change in how we think global in what we do, because that was what IDG was about. Think Africa, think global, and the best of breed in Mzansi. Black professionals who learn from how Mxolisi served his generation must take a leaf from this. Lastly, I'm going to evoke an ancient psalmist. Human life is like grass. We grow like a flower in the field, but after the wind has blown, the flower goes. And so has been the life of this modern David, whose fragrance remains with us, the beauty of his colors continue to inspire us, and his life goes beyond the body that decays with his ancestors. Hamba kahle Mxolisi. You live in us, you live in ABSIP. Thank you.
Thank you, President Bongane, for those moving tributes. We take away from this that we'll honor his legacy by living his legacy and living the way he did. At this point in time, as we continue with the program, we are honored and humbled to have the family of Mr. Mxolisi Mbetse participating in this memorial. We shall now move to a video that is of the family, where we have a director of Citibank London speaking to us on behalf of the family, which is an example of the influence and the immense impact that he had on the financial services sector.
Gogwan, I'm not one for words, and certainly wish I could have been there in person. It is a great honor to be among family and friends, to pay my final respects to my greatest teacher, friend, and consigliere, who, together with my mother, has had the greatest influence on my life. Through you, I've grown to understand family life and how wonderful, how nurturing and rewarding it can be. The greatest gift in life is time, and irrespective of how busy you were, you always made sure to share your time with us, both for leisure, imparting wisdom on life's simple pleasures, and informed discourse to help us understand and navigate life's challenges and obstacles. I'm forever indebted to you for the foundation you've given me, putting me through school, which has given me a high sense of self-regard and helps me stand tall in the world today. Gogwan, there are not enough words to express how much I'm going to miss you. At the same time, while I'm grieving very sorely today, I choose this day to celebrate your life. You lived it to the fullest. And I know that wherever you are up in the heavens, you'll be shining your light and blazing the path forward for us all.
Thank you very much for that warm tribute. I'm reminded of a quote I heard some time ago that said, "The ones we will miss the most are the ones who are most worth celebrating." And I think that has come through a lot in this memorial. At this point in time, we'll then have a voice note from a former Deputy President of ABSIP and current Group CEO of ABSA, Dan Minimele, via voice note.
The President of ABSIP, former presidents, the leadership and members of ABSIP, family and friends of Mxolisi Mbetse. Please accept our sympathies and our best wishes as we come to terms with the loss of Mxolisi. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words as we bid farewell and pay tribute to one of the founding fathers of ABSIP and its second president, as well as a stalwart, a pioneer, and a trailblazer for transformation in the South African financial services sector. While we all know that the work started by the likes of Mutle Mohase, Mxolisi, and those that followed in their footsteps has yet some way to go, we have also seen good progress in the transformation of the sector, which would have not been possible were it not for the strong foundations laid by people like Mxolisi. We owe him a debt of gratitude and need to preserve his legacy by continuing to build upon the strong foundations laid by him and the leaders of his time.
Thank you so much, former President, for those heartfelt words. And it is indeed a debt we cannot repay. At this point in time, please allow me to welcome live here with us a family friend and the founding Treasurer General of the Association of Black Securities and Investment Professionals, to share some words with us, Mr. Vion Bok.
Thank you, Mr. Program Director. To the Mbetse family, Governor of the Reserve Bank, past, and presidents of ABSIP, office bearers of ABSIP, members and friends, I greet you in the name of Yeshua. I thank Mxolisi Mbetse, the third president of ABSIP, who recommended to Paulo Leteka, the current president, that I be afforded this opportunity to eulogize and pay my respects to my friend, my colleague, my confidant, the late, great Mxolisi Mbetse. I'm going to ask that we just bow our heads in a moment of prayer, as I would like to say the following prayer of mercy for our departed friend. God, full of mercy, who dwells in the heights, provide a sure rest upon the divine presence wings within the range of the holy, pure and glorious, whose shining resemble the skies, to the soul of Mxolisi Mbetse, for a charity was given to the memory of his soul. Therefore the Master of Mercy will protect him forever from behind the shadow of his wings, and will tie his soul with the rope of life. The everlasting is his heritage, and he shall rest peacefully upon his resting place. Let us say Amen. Today we gather to remember Mxolisi Mbetse, who was born in Bushbuckridge on the 5th of September 1957 and passed away unexpectedly and so suddenly on the 16th of March 2021. As we remember Mxolisi, we consider a man of deep convictions, who was principled and who lived an impactful life. Reflecting upon his life, I am reminded of the African proverb which says, "A society grows to be great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they will never sit under." This tree, called ABSIP, is what Mxolisi planted. And may this tree, as the psalmist says in Psalm 1, be a tree that is planted by streams of water, yielding its fruit in season, and may its leaves never wither. Many a speaker has expressed the desire for the transformational work envisaged for ABSIP to continue. Our journey with Mxolisi started during the 90s, when there were not many of us in the corporate and investment banking and asset management sectors. Whilst much has already been said about the pioneering work which Mxolisi did as a professional, I wish to offer but a glimpse into his professional life, his life as a family man and as a friend. As Swazi mentioned earlier, it was during 1996 that Mxolisi, Swazi and I were part of the USALEP, United States-South Africa Leadership Exchange Program, where amongst others we attended a corporate finance program at Wharton Business School. We were very impressed with the level of professionalism amongst the African American professionals we met on Wall Street, and we came back to South Africa with a vision to transform and be meaningful players in the South African financial system. South Africa was in the aftermath of liberation from tyranny of apartheid and was essentially a frontier society, a situation where anything was possible, and we were filled with hope of a better society and a brighter future. It was in this context that we were then led by Mxolisi Mbetse as the second president of ABSIP to enhance this platform, ABSIP, for black cohesion, excellence, and transformation of the South African financial system. Members of his EXCO at that time included myself as treasurer, Mxolisi Mbetse, Owen Maubane as SG, Niven Pillay, Swazi Shabalala, Thabo Siyopa, and Lumkile Mondi. As I mentioned, Mxolisi's goal was to raise the bar of excellence in the sector. In this regard, I want to share the story of Peter Eccles, who was born in 1936 and passed away in 1996. Peter Eccles was an African-American investment banker who worked with Goldman Sachs and then with Citibank. During the 1970s, he developed or invented currency swaps, which led to the later development of interest rate swaps. He was essentially responsible for a significant portion of the global derivatives market as we know it today. A black man accomplished this. It took him 8 months to put together his first currency swap, swapping Australian dollars for American dollars. Australia at the time had exchange controls. He was solving this problem of exchange controls and the negative impact it had on multinational companies and their balance sheets. This example, the example of Peter Eccles, is a kind of innovation and tenacity and the excellence which drove Mxolisi to become one of the architects of the National Empowerment Fund and one of the top deal makers and revenue generators for HSBC Simpson McKee, and then for UBS Warburg as chairman of their corporate finance activities in the South African market, and later also then as chairman of the Industrial Development Group. As the Bible teaches us, a man's gift makes room for him. Mxolisi had a gift for networking and deal origination. As Owen Mabani recalled at his funeral, Mxolisi used to say, "I'm not a spanner boy." In other words, I'm not the guy to crunch the numbers and build the financial models. I'm here to put the deal together and to make it happen. He once, in describing his methodology to me, said to me that closing a deal is like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. You have to make sure that all the pieces are in place, and only then can you, when you have put all the pieces in its proper place, can the deal be a success. As we all know, these pieces can be moving parts and throw up challenges and complexities midstream. So it takes a special skill to put together and close deals. Mxolisi had that skill. During those halcyon days, when our careers as bankers were on an upward trajectory, our reading staple included, amongst others, Barbarians at the Gate, Liar's Poker, Rising Through the Wreckage on Wall Street, The House of Morgan, An American Banking Dynasty and the Rise of Modern Finance, and Our Crowd. In addition, Mxolisi had the kind of organic wisdom that comes with being a keen observer of life and its vicissitudes. He was a committed friend who operated with integrity. Speaking of integrity, Mxolisi was mature because of his ability to self-reflect. In other words, he knew the man in the mirror. He knew who that man was. He was a keen judge of character and could size others up pretty quickly. He himself was idiosyncratic in a quirky sense because he was an African man who held strong German sensibilities. He valued ideas and loyalty, and as most of us know, he had an opinion on most things, and as Niven Pillay, our friend, recalls, he was analytical and had an almost sagactic or sage-like ability to read events and political developments. With his friends, he would share generously, and he loved the finer things in life. And he used to say, "Kleiden macht den Leute." Your clothes makes a person or people. He was a snazzy dresser, Mxolisi. And he loved gute Laune mit Musik, nice mood with music. That was Mxolisi. Or picking up his subscription to the Rob Report to see what is happening in the world of high life. He loved the glamour of attending the Formula One race at Monte Carlo. And when we met a few weeks before his passing, he reminisced about his travels, saying he wishes to do another trip to Europe and then to the USA. And talking about traveling, and Swazi spoke about this earlier, it's indeed right that when we went to America, he said, "I'll meet you in America." He went via Europe. But what he did in Europe is he went to the Hugo Boss factory shop. So when he arrived at the hotel in America, he invited me to his room. He opened up his suitcase, and there he had a suitcase full of Hugo Boss clothes, which he had shopped in Germany. But I want to share with you a story which I think was pretty funny at the time. So we are in Baltimore. He's now joined the group in Baltimore, and we have an afternoon off. And he sees this Bang & Olufsen sound system going at a very good price. And he says, "Bjorn, I'm going to buy this thing and take it home." So I say to him, but how are you going to carry it home? It comes in a big box. He says, no, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. So we buy this thing, we carry it back to the hotel, and we get to his room. He proceeds to open this big Samsonite hard case of his suitcase with all the boss clothes in, unpacks the Bang & Olufsen stereo system, rolls it up in the boss clothes, closes the suitcase, and off he goes back to South Africa with his Bang & Olufsen. I think he has that Bang & Olufsen sound system till this day. There's another little story that I want to share, and it's between friends. Mxolisi had a streak in him, he was a little bit vain at times. So when I met Mxolisi, he was driving a white Fiat Uno. And of course, he would later go on to drive Porsches, Ferraris, and Bentleys. But if I wanted him to check him, I would always say to him, listen, do you remember that day when you came and we met at such and such a place and you came in the Uno? And Mxolisi would get so upset at it, and he would accuse me of being sarcastic. But that was Mxolisi. He is survived by his wife Marianne and children Massimo, Miranda, Tandana, Martin, and Gino. And to them we say, your husband, your dad, and your uncle leaves you a legacy of love, self-respect, and self-reliance. He loved his wife Marianne and was dedicated to his family. He adored his children and extended family, many of whom will tell you he built their self-confidence and taught them the virtue of self-belief and never giving up, not to be dependent on others. They will miss his keen interest in their lives, from Massimo's golf to Miranda's tennis and academic excellence, to Martin and Gino's investment banking endeavors. And to Dandana, of course, I would say this, Mxolisi, your uncle, your Ompi, had complete trust in you. May God indeed tie Mxolisi's soul to the rope of life, as we prayed earlier. Before he departed, Jesus said to his disciples that in his Father's house there are many mansions or many rooms, and that he goes to prepare a place for us. Today, let us say that we will make room always in our hearts for Mxolisi, for his family, and for his ideals. Mxolisi, we bless your memory. We thank you for all that you have given us and for all that you mean to us. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you very much, Fion, for that heartfelt, warm, and those funny little moments that you have shared with us about this, our stalwart, and the work that he did and the person that he was. It's always heartwarming to meet a colleague who was also a friend, who can share all sides of the different color of the person that we are engaging on. I think we take away from your heartfelt contribution that not only did he want us to be transformative, he also wanted us to be excellent, and he also wanted us to be great and good human beings. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it continues to come through in many of the presentations that we have had and the tributes that have been poured out with regards to Mr. Mxolisi Mbetse, that he was larger than life. He was someone whom opened up himself to people, to groom them, to train them, to empower them, always aspiring not only for transformation to be transformation for transformation's sake, but for the rise and the creation of black professionals who would hold themselves in the highest regard to the highest standard, to ensure that we had not just a vibrant financial services sector, but a vibrant financial services sector that looks like the demographic of our country. At this point in time, it would be my pleasure and honor to invite the governor of the South African Reserve Bank, Mr. Lesisha Kganyago, to come and join us as he pays tribute also to the late Mr. Mxolisi Mbetse.
Thank you very much, Program Director. The Mbetse family, and in particular, Marian. Thank you very much for, in a way, allowing me to share my memories of this giant and doyen of transformation of the financial services sector. And in trying to find words of inspiration, I thought of the Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran, who said, and I quote, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive character are seared with scars." Close quote. And in a way, when you hear the testimonies and the stories of how Mxolisi Mbetse shaped the transformation of the financial sector at the dawn of democracy, these words resonate. For we were a country that was emerging out of suffering. And a country that was emerging out of suffering, what we had in Mxolisi Mbetse was a strong soul that actually emerged and was the most massive character. And in a way, what you have with what we got out of ABSIP was that, yes, Mxolisi was amongst those people who found ABSIP. But Mxolisi did manage to impose and stamp his own character on what ABSIP was to become. And what we had in Mxolisi had been someone who had placed a premium on thinking. And that thinking about how you shape society, and in a way worked to get ABSIP to become a force that would shape the transformation of the financial services sector. And I remember having this engagement with him. I was a young bureaucrat, and I said, but exactly what is it that you are doing with this role of yours? And he said, you see, my job is not to go and fight over things. My job is to generate ideas and sell those ideas. And he says that, in essence, what corporate and investment banking is about a generation of ideas and packaging those ideas and utilize them to arrive at solutions for clients. And Mxolisi had a difficult job because at the time that he was at HSBC, HSBC was the primary advisor of the government on the restructuring of state-owned enterprises. And I remember saying, so in your advice, how you package this? And it said, well, basically, there are three letters here. You restructure and you retain what you can retain in a restructured form, and that is what government would have. And if government can't do this thing, you do not have a choice, but you sell it. And if it can't be restructured and it can't be sold, there is the last solution, and it's the L, and he said, liquidate. And there were a number of SOEs in that period that were liquidated. And so Mxolisi helped shape the thinking about how you approach and how you position state-owned enterprises in a post-apartheid South Africa. He did move on and started to generate and sell other ideas. And may I be cheeky enough to say that since he focused on that, the government meandered and we couldn't quite understand what government wanted to do with the state-owned enterprises. Mxolisi Mbetse was a banker par excellence. But more importantly, he was a banker who understood how to interweave the interests of society, and whilst interviewing the interests of society, generate ideas that would serve the greater good of society as a banker. And so he was a banker of a special type, so to say. But importantly, Mxolisi knew how to win the influence game. And instead of shouting on the sidelines, he understood that we are in a democracy, and that in a democracy, the shaping of policy and the shaping of legislation is a contested area. And in the words of one Harvard University professor, Michael Watson, he said, if you don't influence government, your competitors and your enemies will influence government to your detriment. And so ABSIP thus was during that era positioned to influence policy, to shape legislation, and importantly, to have a seat in structures in government that determine the course of policy. And one such structure was the advisory board, which was shaping the future trajectory of the financial markets. And if you wanted to know where financial markets were going in the future, you needed to be part of the discourse in the financial market advisory board. There was another structure, not particularly successful. Much except in it, they didn't have kind words to say about it. But it was a structure that was created in terms of the Banks Act, which was supposed to deal with appeals against the decisions of the registrar. And ABSIP had a seat there. And so he didn't just understand how to win the influence game, but he also understood how Black professionals should have their hands on the levers of control, such that we would be able to shape our own destination. KGB was, I can't say economical with words, or he was just modest, but he is not known for his modesty. I suppose he was a little bit embarrassed of the scolding he got from Mxolisi at that meeting at the JSE. And he didn't just say, KGB, that I am not what you, don't use that way. He said to you, don't you ever call me that thing. Because you see, we are meeting here as Black professionals. We are here meeting to shape the future trajectory of the sector. And you are using words that were used when we were in a war. We are not in a war, we are in the contestation of ideas. And you have got to approach what we are faced with as a contestation of ideas. And the ideas that thrive are not the ones that have just been well thought out, but they are the ones that are championed through the decision-making structures. And that necessarily meant understanding how you place your hands on the levers of control such that your ideas are able to thrive. And so when a generation of young ABSIPers came, KGB was a member of that ESCO. Modise was the president of ABSIP when the financial sector charter was negotiated. That financial sector charter was a pioneering charter. It was a pioneering BEE charter. And it was very important in how it was conceptualized and how it actually panned out. For unlike the other charters, the financial sector charter had its origins in the financial sector summit of NEDLAC. And at the time, the black business organizations tasked ABSIP to be the lead negotiator because of the understanding of the sector. And I remember at one stage I was called in because the negotiations had stalled and a meeting was organized late in the evening. Mxolisi couldn't be there, but I had an opportunity of talking to him before we got to that meeting. And we had to meet with the most senior business leaders from black business. And I remember that we had a hot contested discussion. I will not say who, but one of the ABSIPers said to the leaders, don't you dare treat us and call us what you have called us. Because apparently some leader of black business said, the problem with the financial sector charter is that you have got black junior bankers negotiating with their bosses. And there was this swift rebuttal from ABSIP that said, we might be young, but don't call us junior. We understand what the greater good was. And in a way, having those prior meetings with Mxolisi ahead of these meetings actually enabled the ABSIP delegation that night to seize the strategic initiative from that meeting and thus shape the outlook of the financial sector charter. It was the only charter that went beyond ownership and built in stuff from women empowerment to financing of agriculture to financing of not just infrastructure, but of transformational infrastructure and lots of other things. It was also the only charter that had to submit to the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa annually a report on progress in the implementation of that charter. Those young ABSIPers who negotiated this charter, of course, benefited from what today is called the ABSIP Advisory Council, which were these elders who were the founders of ABSIP, who helped to guide the young ABSIPers throughout that process. And the product that they came out with was actually a great product. And then as we look back, we could say that Mxolisi and the founding fathers and mothers of ABSIP had guided that process, and they have actually laid the basis from which the financial sector could be transformed. And it is important that you laid that basis, and it was important for the financial sector to be transformed because the financial sector is to the modern economy what the heart is to the body of a mammal. That just as the heart of a mammal pumps blood through all the parts of the body of the mammal, the financial sector pumps finance across the economy to those areas of the economy that need it the most. And as we write the history of the transformation of this sector, we shall always remember the name Mxolisi Mbetse, who had helped to shape that transformation journey. And but after I had listened to Sandile Zungu paint that strong Zulu history, the Zulu quotation that I had became irrelevant, and I had to retreat to my strength, and I found a Pedi proverb that goes, Muri o mogolo o wele, balata balla bošogošogo. Dithaka di lla bošogošogo, di tlhagana tša rena re tla beela kae. Put simply, a baobab tree had fallen. Those birds that had been nesting in that baobab tree are all chirping because the tree in which they laid their nests has fallen. This has been a life cut too short, but it has been a life well lived. The memory of Mxolisi will be with us, and as we think about who had impacted on the financial sector, the name of Mxolisi Mbetse will always loom large. Thank you very much, Program Director, for allowing me to share these views with you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Governor, for that moving and passionate eulogy to the late Mxolisi Mbetse. I think we take away again that we are bold in our battle for transformation. We are going to be continuing in the contestation of ideas as he has charged us to do. At this particular point in time, please allow me to welcome my boss, the sitting president of ABSIP, Ms. Puloliteka Khadewe, to share her thoughts. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Deputy President. Thank you very much for running this program very well. Really appreciate that. Mr. Program Director, the Mbetse family, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, past presidents of ABSIP, and its former NEC members and current NEC members, the President of the Black Business Council, Mr. Sandile Zungu, fellow ABSIPers and friends of ABSIP. Thank you very much for joining us this evening to celebrate the life of this great giant, this baobab that the Governor has just said has fallen. I must first start by wishing Marion, who is Mxolisi's wife, a belated happy birthday. I understand that it was her birthday yesterday, and I do hope that you had an opportunity under the circumstances to still find joy and celebrate with your family your birthday. We are gathered here today, colleagues, to honor and celebrate this great tree that has fallen. And as you can imagine, as the incumbent president, I feel sufficiently intimidated after listening to the stories of this great man, of this great giant. I'm not quite sure how one fills such big shoes. But the shoes exist and they must be filled by the generation of today who have taken the baton from those who came before us. I must say that just listening to the various submissions that were made by former colleagues, friends, and people who know Mxolisi, I have a renewed respect for the organization that is ABSIP. I feel that we are much richer in our knowledge of the organization, of where it comes from, its essence and its importance to not only the financial services sector, but to driving transformation across all sectors of our economy, because the financial services sector remains at the center and at the heart of driving transformation through the allocation of capital into various sectors of our economy. I must say that, firstly in 1995, when Mxolisi and his cohort of other co-founders were busying themselves with establishing ABSIP, I was still trying to finish my first degree at university and wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I cannot claim to have known the man nor have met the man. What I can attest to, though, is that through the efforts of people like him and some of his colleagues who have spoken here today, we have felt their impact on our lives. We have felt their impact on our careers. I was actually reflecting and thinking that when I was doing my articles, accounting articles, and ABSIP had a career day, I think, and they had various black professionals in investment banking and various other sectors of the financial services sector, talking to young accountants, because in those days, if you did a BCom degree, you became an accountant and nothing more than that. We didn't know much about investment banking. And it was the first time through that ABSIP career day that I personally heard about corporate finance. I personally heard about asset management. I personally heard about fund management. And I must have been halfway through my articles, because at that point I was quite clear in my mind that accounting and auditing were not meant for me. And I didn't know what the alternatives were. And asset management sounded very sexy. Corporate finance sounded very sexy. Fund management sounded very sexy. And because of that planting of the seed by Mxolisi and his cohort at the time, one was bold enough to go and seek out what all these things meant, what all these careers would look like. And today I stand here believing that I'm one of the beneficiaries, or one of the people who really benefited from that pioneering work that they did, where they opened up the sector to us, where they opened up and helped us to understand what the various opportunities are. And I'm amongst a number of black professionals today who own their own fund management firms, who run private equity and venture capital funds, something that was unheard of around 1995. So we stand on their shoulders. The words that have been used throughout today in the various submissions have been things like excellence, where it was clear that the class of 1995 was very unapologetic about the importance and the need for us to be excellent in what we do. So not progressing in the financial services sector and getting opportunities purely because of our blackness, but because actually we were excellent and we were deserving of the positions that we occupied. And I do pray that people of my generations and those that come after us will always remember some of these key principles that informed ABSIP, the essence of ABSIP, that it is about excellence. It's not just about having black faces replacing white faces. I also heard words like belief in ourselves, which is such an important principle that we take for granted, that just because people have opportunities in the workplace or have got exposure, that they believe in ourselves, forgetting that we still struggle as a people from the psychological effects of apartheid, where we continuously feel like we're imposters. We continuously feel like we are not good enough. We continuously feel like we don't deserve to be there. And I do hope that through the various interactions that we continue to have as ABSIP, as professionals within the sector, we really start building a very strong sense of belief in ourselves and understanding and appreciation that we actually deserve to be where we are. And for us to remain where we are, we need to continuously work on improving ourselves. I heard words like Mxolisi was somebody who strove for greatness. So I do hope that we learn from stalwarts like him about the importance of greatness, not just being good enough, but being great at what we do. I also heard underlying themes around somebody who was very, very engaged. So he was not just there, man about town, but he was engaged, he was involved, he was a change maker, he cared, he influenced, he shaped things. So he did not sit by the wayside and expect things to happen and people to do things. He was not a fence sitter. He got into the ring and he was part of the action. And I do pray that all of us as ABSIPers, all of us as leaders of today, all of us as professionals within this sector and various other sectors, we again take lessons from this, where we seek to be great, where we seek to be engaged, where we seek to be involved and influence whatever it is that that is happening around us, because we are not victims. We can be part of the solution. And that's, for me, what I also heard today, a man who did not look at himself as a victim, but a man who got into the ring and made sure that he also threw whatever punches that needed to be thrown, because the fight was certainly worth it. And I say that the fight was worth it because in 1995, when ABSIP was started, there were hardly any black professionals in the financial services sector. I mean, if you were talking about black people in financial services, they were probably at best bank tellers or maybe branch managers in retail banks. But when it came to the real core banking business, they were hardly there. And today we've got a different problem where you almost have black professionals everywhere across the financial services sector. And I think it is really testament to the work that they have done. And I think as a result of the work that they did, which enabled us to step in here into these positions that we currently hold today, it also means that we have got the responsibility of not only protecting and preserving what they were able to build for us to be able to benefit from, but importantly, we've got the responsibility of ensuring that we do not see the reversal of the gains that we have made. And the reality of today is that we are starting to see a reversal of some of the transformation gains that we saw happening when we had political leadership, when we had an ABSIP that was activist, an ABSIP that was visible, an ABSIP that was influencing, an ABSIP that was shaping policy, that was shaping conversation. We actually saw a significant increase in the rate of transformation in those years. Today, we hear of black professionals either being sabotaged. Today, they are senior members of these organizations, and tomorrow they are somehow booted out. And we need to challenge those things because we need to protect the gains that we have made and make sure that we do not see a reversal in them. I do not want to speak for too long because I think my colleagues have spoken very, very well about the men. And I can only commit on behalf of ABSIP, the ABSIP NEC currently, ABSIP members, that we will make sure that we do you proud. All of you who have spoken before me today, we will make sure that we uphold the legacy of Mxolisi Mbetse. We will honor you not by our words, but by our deeds. And we will make sure that we take over. We take over not just in South Africa, but we take over across the continent and we take over across the world. Because we've also been told that for you, the world was your oyster and not just the transformation of the financial services sector in South Africa alone. We promise not to play small. We promise to go out there and really challenge the world and the status quo across the board. To the Mbetse family, we really pray that you find healing. I pray that this is part of a process of celebrating the men that you were so blessed to have in your lives. I know that it is painful. I know that losing a family member, a father, a partner cannot be an easy thing. But I also do hope that in the process of your mourning, you remember that he was impactful in both your lives as well as in the lives of very many South Africans and very many people across the world. And we wish that his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you very much all for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I think before we close, let me read a message that the family has shared to all those who have contributed and all those who have attended this online. Thank you so much for the lovely messages and the support. We truly appreciate the kind words and the heartfelt tributes to our dad, husband, and uncle. I think we are all at a loss for words at the moment, but we know that our dad will continue to live in our hearts, from Marion, Miranda, and Massimo. Thank you so much to everybody who has taken time to contribute messages and to pay tribute to a giant, a stalwart, a gorilla, a baobab tree. And we are the product of the work and the efforts that he has done. We stand tall because of the seeds that he has sown, and we're forever grateful for that. For me, it is especially meaningful that he was from Mpumalanga, proving that the sun rises there, since I'm also from there. And we are grateful for your contribution. To everyone, please, a pleasant good night, and thank you so much for your attendance and participation. Thank you.